gentlemen, we're now ready to start our second session of this forum, which will look at the process of preparing voluntary national reviews by countries of North and Central Asia, and also the challenges and solutions that countries have developed and the sub-region has undertaken in implementing the Sustainable Development Goals, including under the now very changed and difficult circumstances of the COVID-19 crisis. As you know, I'm your MC, and those who have been here in previous sessions already know I have this housekeeping announcement that I'm doing for legal reasons. So just know that the forum is bilingual in English and Russian. You can switch the channels on YouTube or on the other platform that we're using for this meeting. And our interpreters will alternate every 20 minutes. Speakers and participants are requested to be mindful of the additional difficulties experienced by interpreters when working in remote mode, and of the increased likelihood of disruptions to the audio feed to the interpreters. Only the speech of or intervention in the original language is counted as authentic. Interpreters servicing remote meetings can also not be held liable for interruption of services, pixelation, freezing or loss of visual input, and so on, and leaking of information due to inadequate soundproofing and or data loss. So with this announcement, I would like to introduce to you our moderator for this session, Ms. Katinka Weinberger, who is the section chief of the Environment and Development Policy section in the Environment and Development Division of ESCAP. Katinka, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Natasha. Can I be heard? Can you hear me? Could somebody please give me some feedback whether I can be heard?
Yes, we can hear you. Please go ahead.
Excellent. Okay, thank you very much. Thanks, Natasha, for introducing me, and from my side, a really warm welcome to all our presenters, our rapporteurs and panelists, as well as, of course, the viewers on YouTube for this session. Yes, I've been asked to moderate the session. We have 90 minutes and actually quite some ground to cover. The session is entitled Sub-Regional and National Progress Reporting on SDGs in the context of the COVID-19 crisis. And as all of you, of course, are very much aware, progress reporting is really a central element of the 2030 Agenda. And we have indeed a really well-structured three-tier system in place for follow-up and review, which involves the national, the sub-regional, and the regional, and the global level. And at national level, the voluntary national reviews are the primary method for countries to document and to share their efforts in implementing the goals. And in fact, the 2030 Agenda encourages countries to conduct regular and inclusive reviews of progress at the national and subnational levels, which are country-led and country-driven. And that's really what this session is going to focus on, carrying on from the earlier part, which was conducted earlier this afternoon. Then at sub-regional level, ESCAP organizes sub-regional SDG forums, such as this North and Central Asian Multi-Stakeholder Forum on Implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals. And at regional level, ESCAP organizes the Asia-Pacific Forum on Sustainable Development, which usually takes place in late March. Now, the APFSD really has a central role in follow-up and review of implementation of the 2030 Agenda at regional level. And all UN member states from the Asia-Pacific region, as well as representatives from civil society organizations, from academia, from think tanks, from the business sector, parliamentarians participate in the meetings. And the main messages from this sub-regional forum will be feeding into the Asia Pacific Forum later next year. Then at global level, we have the High-Level Political Forum, or the HLPF, as we call it in jargon. And our APFSD is a pre-event to the HLPF. The HLPF is also held at an annual basis. And in 2020, in July of this year, was held with the theme Accelerated Action and Transformative Pathways, Realizing the Decade of Action and Delivery for Sustainable Development. It was held from July 7 to July 16 under the auspices of the Economic and Social Council, and also included a 3-day ministerial meeting from July 14 to July 16. As you would imagine, the HEPF program, given that it happened in July, had to be revised due to the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic. So, for one, it took place in a virtual mode. It had approximately 6,000 participants. And on the substantive side, however, several thematic discussions on building back better after the pandemic were built into the program. The HLPF this year focused on 6 entry points for transformation, which were taken from the Global Sustainable Development Report last year, which had identified 6 such entry points. They include advancing human well-being, ending hunger and achieving food security for all, protecting the planet and building resilience, ensuring access to sustainable energy, sharing economic benefits, bolstering local action to accelerate implementation. This provided the framework for the thematic review during the first week of the HLPF, and these entry points in themselves also already provided an opportunity to discuss some of the early impacts and the likely impacts of the COVID crisis that we've already seen. But then, in light of the COVID-19 disease, the HLPF also went deeper in examining the severe impacts of the pandemic on the progress in the implementation of the 2030 Agenda and the Sustainable Development Goals, and then also discuss concrete measures to address the impacts of the pandemic and how to get back on track to accelerate progress during the SDGs. And really highlighting how the SDGs could serve as a guidepost for building back better and for leaving no one behind. So I think one very strong message that the HLPF really brought forward was that the COVID-19 crisis is having such devastating impacts because we're actually yet to take the SDGs seriously. We're not taking them seriously enough. So if anything, I think support for the bold 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development needs to be strengthened in light of the current global challenges and the COVID-19 crisis in particular. And we need to highlight, all of us together, that we can only turn the negative impacts of the COVID-19 crisis around if we really stay true to the 2030 Agenda. We will have an opportunity to hear more about the impact of COVID-19 on SDG implementation shortly from your experiences, because colleagues had met in breakout groups to discuss voluntary national review reporting and country's progress, focusing especially on issues around leaving no one behind, how to ensure that the consultation process could be as inclusive as possible, how the COVID-19 pandemic has been affecting the ability of governments and other stakeholders in designing development policies that leave no one behind, also in addressing gender equality and empowerment of women, and in terms of looking at the recommendations coming out of the VNR process, how we could finance SDG implementation amidst the recovery responses. So in a little while, I'll ask the rapporteurs of the breakout sessions the floor to my colleague, Mr. Arman Bakhtiyar.
Sorry, Katinka, I think your connection is freezing. Can you refresh the screen?
I understand there's some technical issue. I'd like to ask my colleague Arman Bakmia from the Statistics Division to share his presentation on SDG progress in North and Central Asia with us.
Thank you, Katinka. I hope my voice and video is clear. And hello, everyone. My name is Arman Bakmia. I'm a statistician working with UNESCAP, a statistics division. It's a pleasure to be with you here at this session. My presentation will have three different parts. I will first share with you an overview of where the sub-region, North and Central Asian sub-region, is with SDGs, and then an overview of the data availability on the SDG indicators for the sub-region and its countries. And the third area I would like to share with you today is how ESCAP is supporting data and statistics for SDGs. Next slide, please. Yes, thank you. So where is North and Central Asia with SDGs? Are we on track to achieve our 2030 targets? Next slide, please. The next slide is, this one is providing you with a snapshot of the progress so far on the SDGs for North and Central Asia as a sub-region. So each bar on this chart shows the progress so far since 2000 on each of the 17 goals, and the vertical line shows where we not yet. Please back. Yes, thank you. So the vertical line shows where we should be if we want to be on track and achieve. You can see that except 4 goals, goals 4 quality education, goal 6 clean water and sanitation, reducing inequalities, goal 10 and 16 peace, justice and strong institutions, where the sub-region has made a good progress and is on track to achieve its targets where it can be measured. The rest of the goals, the sub-region is off track, meaning that we will not be able to achieve our targets with the current pace, with business as usual. The rate of progress is obviously diverse across all 17 goals. For some, we have made better progress, like on poverty, on hunger, on affordable and clean energy, on responsible and consumption and production. We have made a better progress with a slight acceleration. We could still be on track, but on some other goals, we are really stagnant, or we are very slow, basically. And significantly, on one of the goals, which is goal 11, sustainable cities and communities, where you see the red bar, that shows that the sub-region is not even on a right direction. We are regressing compared to where we used to be in 2000. So this is an area which requires an extra attention, and it needs a course correction. We have to reverse our current trend if we really want to come back on track on this one. The signals next to each of the bars show the availability of data for this analysis. And you can see that for most of the goals, we do not really have enough data to assess the progress, and those are shown with dash bars, which is like more than almost half of the goals. We don't have enough data in North and Central Asia to assess this progress. Of course, this result have to be interpreted with caution, but also it tells us that we have a big task in front of us to invest in statistics. If we drill down on some of the goals, say, for example, the one which we are regressing on, next, please. The result of this analysis here show that actually within each of those goals also the picture is mixed. Under goal 11, sustainable cities and communities, we can see that some of the targets we have made a better progress, like the open defecation practices or death and missing or affected people from disaster. We have made some progress, but other targets like air pollution, road traffic, death, we are basically regressing, and we need to prioritize. And on the same scenario applies to some of the goals where we even made a good progress. Next, please. Like goal 4, for example, also shows the same story. It is mixed. On some of the targets, we are on track, or we have already achieved, like formal and non-formal education, training, or adult literacy. But on some other areas, like organized learning before primary entry age, and also inequality in all of the education indices overall is off track, and we need to prioritize. Next, please. If we think, so this snapshot showed where we are today, but if you think where we will be in 2030 if we continue business as usual. So this graph is showing an anticipated progress in 2030 using some projections based on our previous trend. And this is for all 169 SDG targets, color-coded by green, yellow, and red. Green means we are on track and we will be able to achieve the target. Yellow means we will miss the target with current pace and we need to accelerate. And red represents those targets where we are actually in the wrong direction and we need a course correction. And the gray areas actually show targets where we cannot measure, and it's huge. You can see that basically more than half of the SDG targets we are not able to measure. We don't have sufficient data. That means that we have a huge task in investing in statistical development. I know it's difficult to read, so let us zoom in one of the goals. Next, please. On goal 8, for instance, again, you can see, next, please. Yeah, you can see a mixed picture here. Of course, we are on track on 3 targets that are green, but we are, in terms of full employment and decent work, we are regressing. Even though at the goal level, it shows some progress, so we can't see where we are regressing. But this picture, it shows us where we actually need to reverse the trend, or areas where we need to prioritize for acceleration, like material resource efficiency of our production or access to financial services, where we need to accelerate progress. Next, please. And now, if we compare different sub-regions, ESCAP has 5 different sub-regions, one of which is North and Central Asia. Each of those sub-regions have their own priorities and their own successes. This graph is using the previous dashboard for all different 5 subregions and highlight where each of the subregions actually are on track or stagnant or regress. And you can see some specific areas for each of those subregions that are unique. In terms of our today's discussion, which is North and Central Asia, you can see that we're on track on goal 6, water sanitation, and goal 10 on reducing inequalities, which is basically unique among all other subregions. But at the same time, North and Central Asia is the only subregion regressing on goal 11 in sustainable cities and communities. So that shows a unique situation in the subregion, and of course it will help us to prioritize. Next, please. And if we drill down to the indicator level, it will help us even further granular data to prioritize where are the areas where we have to basically prioritize and invest more. On the top of this graph are the red bars, where it shows at the indicator level where we are regressing, and the yellow part is the progress gap. So the longer the bar is, meaning that there is a bigger gap to fill. Next, please. If we zoom in to be able to see some of those on the top of this graph on the screen, you can see that where we are regressing or we have a very big gap to fill, it's really a mixed picture. You can see economic, environmental, and social indicators that need to be need acceleration or course correction for the subregion. Next, please. So how is data availability? All of this assessment has been done based on the national data available on the global SDG data platform. And in the next slides, I'm going to show to what extent we have data on indicators, on SDG indicators for North and Central Asia. As you can see from this donut chart, 97, meaning 42% of the total SDG indicators, we have sufficient data, meaning that we have 2 or more data points for more than half of the countries of the subregion. To do such an analysis that we have just presented to you. And on 27%, basically we have only 1 data point, and 31%, 72 out of 231 indicators, basically we do not have any data in the subregion to assess progress. If we look at the country level, next slide please, here I would like to show you how country level data availability is at the in North and Central Asia. Here I'm just showing the top part of the graph, which is countries which data availability is more than the average in ESCAP region. So if the red bar shows the data availability in ESCAP region, which is around 42% of data, sufficient data available in ESCAP, and all countries above ESCAP have more than 42% of data available. Next, please. If you look at the countries on the top part, I've highlighted countries from North and Central Asia, and it's quite good. We have more than half of the countries in this subregion. Basically, the data availability is more than what is an average data availability in ESCAP. And 2 countries on the top actually are coming from North and Central Asia. It shows a relatively good availability of data, but it is compared to the rest of the countries. As you saw from that dashboard, there is still a huge data gap. More than half of the targets cannot be measured. Next, please. And all of this data and analysis you can easily get from Asia Pacific SDG Gateway, which I've provided the link on each of those slides. So how does ESCAP support data and statistics for SDGs? Next, please. Our SDG, Asia Pacific SDG Gateway, is basically packaging all of this data and analysis that we have and make it available for countries in different forms. We're providing the same kind of analysis I just presented as SDG progress assessment for all regions and sub-regions. We have country SDG profiles for all of the SDG indicators, country comparison, data availability, and also one feature is Data Explorer, where the more advanced users of data can download all country-level data on SDGs and beyond, basically for their own analysis. Next, please. We also work very closely to support country-level SDG monitoring. We work very closely with our colleagues at the UN country team, especially UN resident coordinator officers, to provide a similar analysis that I just presented at the country level for them to have a better understanding and establish a dialogue with the government. We work with also national statistical systems to apply the same methodology using their own data. We have developed a tool called EPIC, which stands for Every Policy is Connected. This is a tool that we are helping countries to use to develop their national indicator frameworks, which is integrated into their development policies. And of course, we have a regional advisory services. It depends on the needs expressed by countries we provide to them. Next, please. You can get access to this information, as I mentioned, from the links provided here. Thank you very much. I'm happy to take it if there's any questions regarding what I presented. Back to you, Katinka.
Thank you very much, Arman. Thank you very much for this overview, which I think shows us that where we have data available, good progress has been made on a couple of SDGs, but that overall we still face this immense problem of data availability. And thank you for your offer to take questions. We'll take the rapporteurs first, so please stay on with us. I'm sure there will be a couple of questions later from the audience. I would now like to ask the rapporteurs of the 3 breakout groups that had met earlier this afternoon to join me in the panel. This is Mr. Orman Abdinov, the Chief Advisor at the Sustainable Development and Social Policy Department of the Ministry of Economy of the Republic of Azerbaijan. He will represent the group of countries that presented voluntary national reviews in 2019. This is Azerbaijan, Kazakhstan, and Turkmenistan. I hope you're here with me on the panel now. I don't see you yet. And at the same time, I would also like to ask Mr. Anton Tsvetov, the Deputy Director of the Department of Multilateral Economic Cooperation and Special Projects of the Ministry of Economic Development of the Russian Federation, representing the group of countries that presented VNRs for the first time in 2020, namely Kyrgyzstan, Russia, and Uzbekistan. And finally, Ms. Manuchetra Machonova, head of the main department on investment and development of the Ministry of Economic Development and Trade of the Republic of Tajikistan, who represents the group of countries that presented the VNRs either for the second time in 2020 or will be presenting it again soon. That's Armenia, Georgia, and Tajikistan. Can I please ask that all of you request for the floor? Do we also have Mr. Orman Abdinov? There he is. I can see him now. And is also accepted. Very good. So, Mr. Orman Abdinov, I would like you to speak first and briefly present us with the summary of the main areas of discussion and agreement that were discussed in the group that you participated in earlier this afternoon. Please click on your microphone and camera button so that we can hear and see you. Over. Mr. Abdinov. Your request to speak has been accepted. Can you please click the microphone and the camera button? Okay, while I ask our team to address the technical difficulties that there may be, let's continue with those two panelists that are already here with me on the virtual floor. And I would then like to ask Mr. Zetov to go first and to give us an overview on the discussions amongst those countries that have presented their VNR for the first time in 2020. The floor is yours, please.
Thank you, Chair. Уважаемый господин председатель, уважаемые участники форума.
Chairperson, distinguished participants of the forum. So this is my honor to present brief discussions in our group, which we're providing for the first time VNR. So these are Kyrgyzstan, Russian Federation, and Uzbekistan. For all of us, that was the first experience, and that was quite a valuable and important experience. We just took the lessons, how the implementation of SDG is carried out by the community. So all the countries, we're talking about alignment of the 2030 agenda and all the context of the country. We discussed the importance of integration and different indicators and the practice of governmental governance. Of course, the pandemic made certain adjustments of our plans, but still the priorities of our countries are aimed at ensuring health and life of our citizens and supporting entrepreneurship activities. Of course, we are expecting some reorientation of priorities due to economic impact of COVID-19, but still for all of us, sustainability of economic development, of social development of our countries is the priority. All the countries just underlined the importance of the SDG implementation and no one left behind motto. So, but this is not only relates not only to SDG monitoring in our country, but special attention is paid to vulnerable groups in implementation of the governmental policy, in particular involving interest stakeholders to all the processes in our country, so that the countries would cooperate with the public, private sectors and academia and civil society, so that their voices would be heard and so that they would provide additional assessments on evaluations how the process goes in our countries.
Из нас приоритетом остается борьба с бедностью.
The vulnerable groups are concerned, our priority is to fight with hunger. We all speak about the importance of women's empowerment, supporting young people and other vulnerable groups. We underscore not only supporting these groups of population, but also their engagement in terms of further steps for SDGs implementation and 2030 development agenda. And the final thing, which we agreed to speak about based on our group discussion, is the digitalization capacity for SDGs. COVID-19 pandemic and associated with it challenges in social and economic life underscored the importance of digitalization and contactless and paperless services for population, providing the public with remote services to all our countries. Digitalization is an important tool for social and economic development and SDGs. I want to thank the forum participants and specifically our group members, representatives of Uzbekistan, for fruitful discussion on the perspectives of SDGs implementation in our sub-region. Thank you.
Thank you very much for these interesting insights, and I'm sure in the discussion later we will have more questions related to especially the challenges that you may have faced in ensuring that your VNR processes were inclusive and especially gender responsive, as you had alluded to gender empowerment. Thank you very much for that. I see now that Mr. Abdinov has been accepted. So I will ask you to take the floor in your function as representation of those countries that had presented their VNRs in 2019. Mr. Abdinov, please click the microphone and the camera button now. Thank you. I think that our speaker is still facing technical issues, and while we continue to try to get him online, and I'm asking our colleagues who are supporting on the technical side to assist Mr. Abdinov, I will now ask Ms. Manuchetra Majonova, who represents those countries that presented their voluntary national views for the second time in 2020, or will soon be presented for a second time, to speak on behalf of these group of countries. Please, Ms. Majonova, the floor is yours.
Hello, thank you for the submitting floors. I would like to summarize key points of my peer countries' national progress reporting on SDGs, and in the context of COVID, and stress that all the countries, while voluntary national report preparation and have been summarized next steps on ensuring the SDG implementation. So in order to ensure SDG further implementation, following next steps have been stressed by all the countries. These are paying specific attention on monitoring, on evaluation, of disaggregated data and SDGs localization issues. Also, it has been stressed that introduction of gender-based indicators is very important to ensure gender equality. And it is necessary to continue nationalization of SDG indicators. Also, it is important to continue integration of SDGs into the national, sectoral, and local programs. Also, it has been stressed that in order to ensure SDG implementation in the further stage, we have to continue or to reveal the ways to mobilize resource of the private sector and to involve the private sector actively in order to implement SDGs, raising awareness of the public sector, of the other key state, of the civil society and other key stakeholders is also is of high importance, and as it has been highlighted in Georgia experience, that the online platform on SDG raising SDG online platform is very effective to raise awareness and also to collect key stakeholders and civil society proposal in this regard, as well as in order to ensure SDG implementation, all the countries conclude that government have been reassessed their targeted indicators, macroeconomic indicator, and their approach and strategies in order to ensure proper, in order to ensure proper approach to the private sector development and to ensure social and economic development in countries, and also the government support for vulnerable group of population is very important in order to ensure SDG implementation. Key indicators, especially support of women, youth, and other vulnerable groups of population. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Marjanova, for your succinct summary, which gave us an indication on how second-timers have been dealing with the different challenges that the voluntary national review provides for. And I'm sure in the discussion that we have later on, maybe we can hear more about how the second VNR has contributed to updating or revising plans to implement the SDGs, especially also considering the COVID-19 situation. Okay, thank you very much again. We still have our third rapporteur, but I take it he is not yet connected. We will give him another half a minute to try, please. Mr. Abdinov, can you please try one more time? To request for the floor, you have to wait for a little bit. You will be given the floor, and then you need to request the microphone and turn on your camera. Great, I see that you're accepted. Please wait a little bit, and then the buttons at the bottom of your screen, the microphone button and the camera button, should turn on, and please click these two buttons. Can you do that? The two round buttons in the middle of your screen, mic on, microphone and camera. Mr. Abdinov, do you see the microphone and the camera button, and can you click them, please? Okay, I think time is progressing. We will have our technical staff continuing to support. I will wait another half a minute, but I would already like to ask our panelists the Honorable Mr. Ali Berg, the Deputy Minister of Economy of the Kyrgyz Republic, Mr. Dmitry Ezov, the Head of the International Cooperation Section, and Ms. Elena Danilova-Kross, Program Specialist on Poverty and Inequality, as well as Ms. Tamar Yakubidze, Monitoring and Evaluation Specialist and SDG Focal Point of the Caucasus Environmental NGO Network, to come on stage, while we continue to wait for Mr. Orman Abdinov to join us here as well. Thank you very much. I think we're nearly complete. We still wait for Mr. Dmitry Ezov. And Mr. Svetov, I would like to ask you to release the microphone, please. Thank you very much. Can you please release the microphone?
Is this okay?
Mr. Svetov, please release the microphone. Please click the large bright blue button on the right side. Thank you. I believe we're still awaiting Mr. Alibayev, the Minister of Economy of the Kyrgyz Republic. Thank you very much for bearing with us for these technical difficulties. Clearly, a virtual meeting is not as easy to organize as a physical one. Mr. Alibayev, I see that you are with us, but you have not requested for the floor. Can you? Oh, there you are. Okay, excellent. Good. And while we still wait for Mr. Abdinov to sort out his technical difficulties, I think we could already continue giving the time limitations. And I would first like to ask our Honorable Deputy Minister of Economy of the Kyrgyz Republic, who represents one of those countries that presented its VNR, its first VNR in 2020, whether from your perspective you would like to add anything to the messages that we heard from the 2020 countries. And perhaps you could especially focus on addressing how different levels of government, the national level, the local level, the subnational level, were all engaged in the preparation of the voluntary national review. The floor is yours, please, for a short intervention.
Thank you for your question. In general, if we speak about our work, how it is organized, first, we created working groups on major 5 areas in order to develop VNR for economic issues, environmental issues, legal issues, social issues, and statistics monitoring. We were working on 5 dimensions. In each area, we had working groups established, and those working groups were involved representatives of all sectors: social sector, civil society, business, governmental administration, and so on. And we prepared voluntary national review, which we provided prior to that. And of course, we reported back in July. So that was the first time Kyrgyzstan provided VNR. So as the situation shows, all that was conducted in a remote mode as a video conference. And of course, not all of people could take part or like offline. So that was an online event. Of course, in the first part, we communicated our achievements, our challenges that we are facing in economy, and on the crisis that is being experienced by many countries today, as well as on our issues and challenges that are associated with the finance of our projects, including within SDGs and strategic documents. During the recent time, of course, much attention is paid to digitalization of the country. And this work was launched long ago. However, as a result of the pandemic, of course, that work was enhanced, and the mere situation just led to that necessity. And the situation is like this. If you have certain questions, ready to take them. Thank you.
Thank you so much for this very succinct but yet very insightful brief description of the process that has been taken in Kyrgyzstan. And of course, as you also pointed out, the pandemic, the impacts of the COVID-19 are very much at the forefront of everybody these days. Nobody can think about policy making without thinking about how it will support those most affected by the crisis, which, however, requires financing. It requires funds. It requires the availability of funds. So I would like to ask Mr. Ezov, the head of the International Cooperation section, to briefly reflect on the statements of the rapporteurs that we had just heard, and perhaps also share with us some of your insights on how to ensure that many of the governments that are struggling to ensuring financing for development, and this struggle has intensified during the COVID-19 crisis, how can interregional organizations support governments in this process and support them in financing SDG implementation amid COVID-19 recovery responses? The floor is yours. Thank you.
Уважаемая госпожа модератор, уважаемые
moderator, distinguished colleagues, thank you very much for your interesting presentations and intervention, and thank you for your questions. I will try to answer it briefly, and my question will be associated with what conclusions Eurasian Economic Commission just made when we were doing the first review, how our government and EC is just moving toward implementation of SDGs. We just had a conclusion that economic integration is an additional mechanism, an additional contribution of our countries into SDG implementation or attainment. We just made the conclusion that where such integration is highly developed, at least in our Eurasian Economic Commission, Armenia, Belarus, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, and Russian Federation, there we observed most positive dynamics in attaining SDGs. And of course, there are no topical or recent data which would allow us to compare how these indicators are affected by COVID-19, but we are sure that the integration mechanisms available would allow to minimize negative impact, which would be just faced by the countries without participating in such integration program. So the participants were talking about digitalization, so which is aimed at accelerating achieving SDG. I would just underline that Eurasian Economic Commission has been paying much more attention since 2016, and we are going to discuss the results which would impact achievement of SDGs. We are applying tariff and non-tariff regulation, strata, substrata indicators, and we think that digitalization would show additional effect. In addition, we see now how all the nations have their own programs, how to move toward achievement of SDG, and how they're informing the global community about such achievements. We proceed from the fact that the programs that are available on the level of integration would help countries move in this direction. And we think that the mere topics of SDGs, and it was mentioned here, that business should evaluate or assess its projects through SDGs. The government should assess everything through SDGs, and we expect that regional programs would be assessed through SDGs. That means there should be some tentative conclusion how this or appraisal how this or that strategy or just forming a common market would facilitate attaining SDGs. And we would like to emphasize that all the countries, members of Eurasian Economic Commission, are moving toward resolving their issues. And on the level of integration, there may be some general analysis, a common analysis, not only of our contribution to this integration, but just to monitor how our countries are moving toward this goal. And I would like to emphasize separately that Eurasian Commission versus 2017, when we just made the first analysis of SDG achievement in the Eurasian space, just noted good progress. The colleague that made presentation just mentioned assessment evaluation of availability of statistics and information. So our specialists who are in charge of this are enhancing the work how these indicators can be evaluated on the level of the region. So we have good contacts and cooperation with the statistical services and departments of these countries, and the scope of indicators is being expanded. Moreover, we're working quite intensifying our work, thus working with the experts, and quite often we get recommendations that not always the list of indicators that is just approved by UN is complete. So and we can just get we can obtain certain indicators that allow to assess how our mechanisms impact achievement of SDGs. Of course, it's not within the UN tool, but or methodology, but it allows to understand whether this or that element facilitates attaining certain goal, and therefore we are interested in cooperation and integration with UN Economic Commission and UNC and UNESCAP, and within ECASOS, within the political forum of high level, and we are developing this topic in order to so that our review, which is prepared by our EAC, would be more comprehensive, thus covering a broader scope of indicators. Therefore, I think that there is fruit for such dialogue, and it would be from the point of view statistics, practice, and methodology, because a methodological issue of methodology, in this regard, we would be grateful for UNESCAP and other and commissions of UN, how to promote this issue at the regional level. So thank you very much, distinguished colleagues. We will keep an eye on the discussion, and if there is a need just to provide some comment or answer some questions, so ready to take them or answer them. Thank you.
Very much for these interesting points in relation to the strong positive impacts that you see of stronger integration, especially as they relate to data issues, to common markets, on the impacts of COVID-19. And let's turn now towards Ms. Elena Danilova-Cross, who's the program specialist on poverty and inequality. Mr. Ezo, can I please ask you to turn off your microphone? Just turn off the microphone, yeah? Thank you. Ms. Danilova-Cross, who's the program specialist on poverty and inequality with UNDP. And given your breadth of experience in the region, could you share with us, from your perspective, to what extent did government measures against COVID-19 affect positively on poverty levels in North and Central Asia? Thank you. We lost Elena.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you, yes, but not see you. But at least we can hear you. That's great. Yes.
Okay.
Did you hear the question?
If you could repeat again.
Could you, given your breadth of experience in the region, could you share with us to what extent government measures against COVID-19, the recovery packages, to addressing COVID-19 had an effect on poverty levels in North and Central Asia?
Well, thank you for this question. Yes, indeed, the COVID-19 pandemic undermined the achievements of the SDGs in almost all the countries in the region. And actually, pandemic revealed some particular areas I can even mention. For example, it's not only SDG 1 on poverty, it's also about the food security on SDG 2. It's also about on the incomes and jobs on the SDG 8. It has a lot of connection to issues of, for example, education and health combined. So if we speak about poverty, we cannot only speak about in monetary terms. It's a multidimensional phenomena, and countries had to respond effectively, and many of them had fiscal monetary measures in place. They also had some deferrals, taxation deferrals. They also had some food security measures in the way social protection, support to businesses and entrepreneurs. So it is a very complex issue which has to be tackled from many directions. For example, in the group where I was moderating for countries of Azerbaijan, Turkmenistan, and Kazakhstan, Azerbaijan was saying that they really took lots of measures on supporting unemployed people, giving them social packages, self-employment, so that the level of poverty are not going dramatically down. So if you understand which SDGs are specifically affected in your country by COVID, then by tackling them first or giving short-term prioritization to these issues, which actually uplift and improve the multidimensional poverty implications in the country.
Hello.
Thanks so much, Elena, for these insights. I see now that we have Rapporteur. Yes, I see that we have you on board now, Orman Abdinov. Thank you very much. It's great to have you here. I think you just heard the interventions that the contributions from our panelists, since we had to move on, but we really wanted to give you a chance also to briefly reflect on the main elements of discussion in your working group, which was a group of countries that had done their VNRs, their voluntary national reviews, in 2019, when, of course, nobody had yet heard anything of COVID, but we're all sure that in the aftermath of implementing your VNR, COVID is impacting on your processes as well. So please, the floor is yours.
First of all, thank you very much for giving me a chance. As I participated in the session 2A, Azerbaijan, Kazakhstan, and Turkmenistan presented their stage of progress and what these countries has done during the COVID-19 pandemic. And for Turkmenistan, I saw that they have the state programs 2019 to 2025, which cover all the issues. And Azerbaijan and Kazakhstan also have started to have Azerbaijan and Kazakhstan also have state programs and government strategies to how to combat tackling the COVID-19 negative effects. And apart from that, for my country's experiences, Azerbaijan, as I mentioned in the session today, Azerbaijan has done lots of things for the decrease of negative effects of COVID-19. And not Azerbaijan also, I also like the Kazakhstan and Turkmenistan experiences, what they have done since the COVID-19 started. And at the end of, I would like to say that the COVID-19 is a test of societies, is a test of governments, is a test of communities, and is a test of individuals. And I think that it's a time for solidarity and cooperation to tackle the virus and to mitigate the effects of the not COVID-19, but also the other, let's say that the viruses and other problems. Therefore, I think that strengthening the regional cooperation and between countries between the region will help us, will give us an opportunity and a chance to tackle down all these problems, not only COVID-19 but also others problem which the region countries have already faces. And before actually this, the representative who are working at UNESCO, his name is Myanmar, if I'm not mistaken. He actually showed a great presentation that I saw that in the region, in the North and Central Asia region, we have a good progress in education, clean water and sanitation, and reduce inequalities and peace and justice. In these 4 targets, North and Central Asian government have made great progress. But if we look at the SDG targets as a whole, we should have a great progress not in all 4 targets. We should have a great great progress in all 17 targets. And if we look at these all 17 targets, of course, it should be to strengthen the regional cooperation. Of course, it should be to use best experiences not only in the region countries. For example, in my country, for example, Azerbaijan can take good experiences from Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan, and also the other countries also take good experiences from our country. And I don't want to take much your time. In the session 2A, I actually have talked about what Azerbaijan has done since COVID-19 started. But if you want me to tell you the specific numbers in the economy, I can actually tell you. And if you have any question, I can. It's my pleasure actually to answer all of your questions. That's all.
Thank you so much, and so glad that we could still get you connected. Please stay with us for the time being.
I'm staying, thank you.
Yes, very good to participate in the discussion afterwards. But we still also have another panelist, Ms. Tamar Jakubidze, who hasn't spoken yet, who is the monitoring and evaluation specialist as well as the SDG focal point of the Caucus of Environmental NGO Network. And given you're a specialist on monitoring and evaluation, and considering what you've just heard from the rapporteurs as well as the other panelists, I would like to hear from you whether you think that enough efforts are being made to strengthen national statistical systems and the availability of quality data, and what opportunities you see for institutional innovations as well as for stronger partnership between government and public foundations such as yours to bridge the divide that we see. Thank you.
Thanks a lot for a very interesting question. Indeed, in Georgia, Statistical Office works very hard on SDGs and is responsible for most of the data that is collected. So most of the data we have for our nationalized targets and goals come from official sources, from government sources, and some of the targets are also measured by large surveys that are also coordinated with the National Statistics Office, and they do a great job actually, even though data quality, of course, like in many developing countries, remains a challenge, but they're very engaged in the entire process. What we would from my perspective, as I represent an NGO, what we are always advocating for and saying as an additional challenge is that the non-state data, or the data that is collected, that is created in parallel to the government activities, is virtually non-reflected in the reports so far? Well, we have access to VNR process as our organization is also one of the co-chairs of a thematic working group. There are 4 thematic working groups in Georgia, and we represent the environmental one. And we did have a chance to have a look at the report, the draft report, before it was prepared, before it was finalized. But still, it's a very limited way of engagement. And we've had these discussions directly with the government representatives and the representatives of the National Statistics Office, and their argument is mostly about the quality of the data, which makes sense because, of course, it requires a lot of human resources and also financial resources to check the quality of the data collected by non-state stakeholders and make sure that they could be integrated. But we also believe there are many good examples in other countries where there is a possibility for creating a more joint report. As far as I know, Finland was one of the countries that was going to create a quite unique approach of VNR, where one page would be dedicated to the state data and another page on the same target would be reflecting non-state data. That is, to my opinion, an approach that we should also strive to have in Georgia. Of course, we could always have a shadow report, but in my personal opinion, SDGs is unique in the sense that it stresses the importance of horizontal cooperation and governance of all stakeholders with each other. So in that sense, creating a shadow report which would potentially be from more maybe a watchdog position would not maybe necessarily be in line with the values and idea of SDGs. So I personally believe it would make much more sense to try to integrate the data from non-state stakeholders, including private sector and academia, directly into the report. In this current report, what was done is that there was a small survey among non-state stakeholders in Georgia. We also participated in that. And there was a chance for us to give our feedback and give a little bit of a mapping of what we're doing in connection to SDGs and how we through our projects are also contributing, which maybe cannot be directly measured in a quantitative sense, but of course still affects the entire overall achievement of SDGs in qualitative sense. So that was done. That's included as one of the annexes to VNR report of Georgia of this year. But that's my personal perspective, that I believe for next year we should strive to have a more integrated approach to which I know is a challenge and requires a lot of work from a lot of coordination also from between all stakeholders. But that would be, in my opinion, the ideal, or not ideal maybe, but just a better version to strive to.
Thank you very much. And indeed, I think there are very many interesting experiences from around the world on how different sources of data, different providers of data, including society organizations, have been integrated, have been used to shape perceptions that are being reflected through the voluntary national review. So it was really interesting to hear from the example of Georgia as well. I would now like to try an experiment, actually, because we had earlier been informed we can only have a very limited number on the floor here. But I would like to ask our previous two rapporteurs also, Mr. Tsvetov and Ms. Machanova, to join us back on the panel, because we have a number of questions from the audience. Could I just ask that you join us back by requesting the camera? Yes, I see that you are on the request list, but we need our technical colleagues to please grant access. Colleagues in Bangkok, please grant access to Mr. Svetov and Ms. Machonova.
Sorry, Katinka, we have a maximum of 6 persons at the same time, so maybe we have to release one speaker.
Okay, then maybe let me quickly look at my list of questions here. I have a question for Mr. Ezov. Yeah, please stay with us, and then we will release you. The question to you is, excuse me, Mr. Abdinov, can you please turn off your microphone? Just turn off the microphone. Anybody who's not speaking, please turn off your microphone. Mr. Abdinov, can you please turn off your microphone, Mr. Abdinov? Thank you. In preparing voluntary national reviews, how extensively do countries in North and Central Asia cooperate with one another? And do you see untapped potential in further cross-country cooperation for VNR preparation? The question to you, Mr. Ezov.
Ну, если разрешите короткий комментарий, конечно.
Me just a brief comment. So of course, countries cooperate not only in preparing VNR, so they are just formally agreed and endorsed because they have to meet the statistics data so that the data could be comparable, and of course so that they would be unbiased. And of course Eurasian Commission just works with the governments in this regard. Moreover, so the question of comparability of data are discussed at the level of national statistical services. Under the auspice of Eurasian Economic Commission. That happened back in 2017 when we were preparing the first VNR, and when that happens when specialists discuss how to improve statistical data. And quite recently, so the statistical paper was published, how to improve a collection of data. So it was approximately 68 target indicators that were assessed. As far as cooperation in general, which is aimed at preparing statistics for SDGs, we see where countries are cooperating. So we can see that this presents additional dialogue between the countries on the platform of Eurasian Economic Union to attain SDGs, because the analysis that we accomplished shows that the approaches countries employ to attain goals at the national level, they are very similar. Of course, there are certain national specifics. Take into consideration priorities and input data, the level of economic development or baseline level for each indicator. Of course, integration is just interaction finally in order to make this a high level of data convergency or indicator convergence. To say that COVID-19 crisis, yes, this is true, but we still have to wait until the data are collected for 2020 so that we will be able to compare to what extent they were strong, or maybe there was some strong gap in the data. Sorry. Thank you.
For this response, Mr. Ezov, and can I please ask you to now release the microphone so that we can invite other panelists, other rapporteurs back on the panel. Thank you very much. I have a question here for Mr. Aliberg. The question is, how can governments bridge the urban-rural divide in terms of disaggregated statistical reporting, taking into account especially the prevalence of informal economies in Central Asian countries? Floor is yours. Or would you like me to repeat?
Я понял. Спасибо за вопрос.
Thank you for your question. As far as informal economy is concerned, if you look at the data of the statistical committee, so the share of informal economy is 24%. According to the recent estimations that was made jointly with the World Bank, the share of the informal sector was 37%. According to IMF, approximately 38-39%. So this is the share of informal sector. In general, in order to reduce the share of informal sector, the government is developing program to reduce the share of this sector, informal sector. So as a basis, fiscal measures are taken and other measures which are aimed at reducing the share of this sector. Of course, this is a big share, and this has a negative impact on economic development. And we think that through digitalization, through fiscal measures, we'll be able to reduce the share of informal sector. In general, the government, as I already said, after the beginning of the pandemic, the government adopted 3 action plans that were aimed at reducing and mitigating negative impact by COVID-19. And of course, in addition, other measures were taken within the framework of regulatory acts, changes and amendments to legal acts. And of course, this work is going to proceed. There are certain issues in the field of SDGs, because, as I mentioned earlier, those measures could be associated not only with the governance, but finances. And we do think that with the support of our partners, investors, and of course, the government, just mentioned that, I already mentioned that in order to reduce the pressure and that burden, the government is carrying out work to restructure the external debt of the Kyrgyz Republic. As far as digitalization is concerned, I mentioned that every day as this issue becomes more and more topical and relevant, because digitalization development plays a very important role. As we mentioned earlier, this is not only aimed at the development, but to inform population, to provide access to population for, and so digitalization plays a very important role. As far as access to statistical data is concerned, from the slides we can see that we are at a higher level, and I think this work is going to continue. Within SDGs, as I already mentioned, we have a group or task force, and so this group is carrying out just work jointly with the government, with the civil society, and other stakeholders who would like to get more access to or broader access to information. So that's all from my part. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much indeed. And very interesting to hear the focus that you're setting on addressing issues related to the informal sector. Mr. Alibayev, could I ask you to please release the microphone at this point so that we could ask, thank you, so that we could ask our rapporteurs back on the stage. Thank you so much. Could we also have Mr. Abdinov back? Not yet, but maybe he can still hear us. There's a question I think that would be addressed to all three of you. The representative of Azerbaijan, representative of the Russian Federation, and the representative of Tajikistan. The question is, if you could share with us the tools and initiatives that have been introduced in your countries that you're aware of to facilitate positive systemic transformation, which emphasizes the interdependence between economic, social, and economy spheres. So the question is really, what are the systemic transformations that have been put in place, and through which tools, through which initiatives, to really focus on these interdependencies that we see between the environment, between the social sector, between the economy. Who would like to go first?
Could you clarify, please, one what?
The question is, are you aware of tools or initiatives, partnerships that have been introduced in your countries that facilitate systemic transformation that really looks at the interdependencies between the social sector, between the environmental sector, and the economic sector? It is a question from the audience.
Если можно, я бы хотел ответить на этот вопрос.
I would like to take this question. So thank you very much for this question. Yes, indeed. And on SDG agenda shows this importance of this interdependence of social, economic, and environmental development. And the pandemic, from our point of view, revealed this interrelation to high extent than before. We can witness that the countries are in the situation when quite difficult decisions are needed on growth rates, on growth quality, on securing lives and health, and the majority of countries of the world are facing this. In the Russian Federation, a decree on new national goals was adopted quite recently, which just comprises measures of economic, social, and ecological or environmental development. So these include the measures, purely economic measures, purely social measures, and there are two indicators associated with improvement of environment, which has an impact on well-being of citizens. Second, so Russian Federation has adopted the strategy of low carbon development, which envisages long-term trends of country development linked to the green gases emissions, GHG, greenhouse gas emissions, which would allow us to just link them to the economic, social, and environmental targets. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much. Mr. Abdinov, Ms. Majanova, would either of you want to address this question as well?
Okay, let me answer to these questions. In regard with tools and initiatives on facilitation interdependency of economic, ecological, and social sectors. In our national development strategy, mostly green economic initiatives has been introduced, and Tajikistan has been recognized as a carbon neutral economy, as we use mostly hydropower for our economic growth, and those while providing population with the clean energy, and also we simultaneously protect our environment as well. The electricity is a key export good of our country for has been recognized as a strategic export good of our country, and also we have been integrated into the CASA 1000 projects that allows us to share our electricity with other countries of the region. In cooperation and to collaborate with other countries of the region. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. Mr. Abdinov, anything from your perspective? The question had been, and I can repeat it. Yes, we can hear you. Did you hear the question? The question had been, what tools, initiatives, partnerships are you aware of that have been introduced in your countries that facilitate positive systemic transformation, which emphasizes the interdependence between the environment, social and economic spheres?
Thank you very much for your question. As all of you are aware that one of the main points of the SDG targets is the ecological target. So when our government started to adopt 2013 agenda, we actually started to implement all the targets, especially the environmental targets in our country. So as you are aware that we are exporting oil and gas to the European countries. So our government started to get money from the gas and oil and started to diversify, to spend that money with the greener, with the start to green economy, and as well as we have at the Ministry of Ecology of Azerbaijan Republic has started to implement lots of strategies, and also in our policy documents and government strategies, and also we have strategic roadmap. We always take into consider the ecological problem, as well as the how can I say, as well as that to implement, to start to build green economy in our in our economy. So that's all.
Thank you very much. We still have a couple of questions from our participants. I wonder whether Arman is with us now. And Mr. Abdinov and Ms. Majunova, can I please ask you to release your microphones so that we make space for Arman? Arman, there is a question addressed to you. This is, how can digital technologies and new innovations in statistics, such as big data, machine learning, and so on, solve the current data deficiency that you were talking about in your presentation to evaluate the SDGs?
Thank you for the question. Indeed, one of the areas where countries are now looking into, as well as international organizations, is to see how what we call big data, which includes, of course, mobile phone data, geospatial information, areas where AI can help us to generate data, such as citizen-generated information and data. All of those play a great role to fill in the data gap. Some of them directly to SDG indicators. We have SDG indicators, not too many, but some of them, in particular, those that GIS information system can help to produce data. Already, international organizations try to produce information on those. But there are areas where countries are looking into some proxies when the official statistic is not available. Especially during the time of pandemic, there is a momentum now because we realize that the official statistics, because of the time that it consumes, because of the quality issues, because of the confidentiality issues, privacy issues, it really is a time-consuming exercise. And normally, by the time the data from official statistics are out, they are already 1 year or 2 year old. And in order to monitor the current situation, they may not really be very useful. And those are the areas where the policymakers are seeking for more updated information, which is where the big data can help. But of course, there's always the issue of quality with the big data that concern official statisticians, and we need to be careful with them. The fact that they're not coming from the survey, the fact that they're not sometimes covering the entire population, the fact that they're sometimes biased towards certain group of the population represented, and also the fact that in many countries we still have a digital divide, and not all parts of the population have access to internet and mobile network, and those are basically the barriers for fully embracing this new source of data for official statistics. But there is a momentum, and it is really accelerating. There is a global working group on big data, which is Secretariat is DESA Statistics Division, but many of the national statistical offices are members of those working groups. They are basically laying down the strategy at the global level and showcasing many examples of where national statistical offices have used this source of data to produce the statistics. For example, they are using the navigation information on transportation to produce data on trade. They are using mobile network data to assess poverty situation in country. There are many examples. As I encourage colleagues to look at the global working group on big data. They have a marketplace platform where you can see lots of very good examples of where this data are being used for official statistics, including a scanner data, if you consider them as big data. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Arman. We have 2 minutes left, and I wanted to hear from both Elena and Tamar, who hadn't had another chance to speak, whether, based on what you've just heard, there are any additional reflections that you wanted to share with us, perhaps addressing especially the element of leaving no one behind, which has been one of the guiding questions or principles of this session also. Either of you, very briefly, 1 minute. Elena?
Thank you, Katinka, for this brilliant question. Yes, leaving no one behind principle for SDGs is a driving force for us to make progress, considerable progress with achievement of SDGs by 2030. And at the same time, it's a big challenge. And it's a challenge statistically because it requires huge disaggregation by different dimensions. It also requires transformational change in how we measure things, not only from official statistical point of view, but also big data, massive data. Unfortunately, at the moment, our unit of analysis through the surveys that we run is a household. But there are so intra-household differentials, inequalities, and there are so many people who are hard to reach, who are basically dropping off these households, who are homeless, who are in the move, who are institutionalized. These people are invisible. And these are huge groups of population that have to be taken into account, and they are not part of the consultations that we run, and are not having public awareness of what's going on. So the opportunity that COVID-19 gave us is this expansion of the digitalization. Now we have so many apps, we have so many opportunities to reach these people, to engage them. I will give example of Kazakhstan, who after they released the VNR in 2019, they were running some sort of an SDG game, which was a hackathon, and it was helping different groups of population to sit around the table and to basically, through the normal human language, identify the basic priorities in the localities where they live. So it was not centrally organized. These were round tables and missions going around the country. And the people, through the normal language, were releasing their issues, which were codified through the SDG terms, through the SDG targets. So in a huge territorial country like Kazakhstan, it was obvious that priorities, issues, problems that people face are absolutely different depending on their realities. And now they try to digitalize this game so that all this mass of information can be accumulated and analyzed using the artificial intelligence.
Thank you.
So
my organizers are really on my back trying to finish the session, but I think very interesting, concrete experience at the end of the session on how this could be achieved. Tamar, any last word from you? 1 minute, please.
Thank you for this another chance. I actually wanted to briefly comment also on COVID-19 effects on Georgia in terms of SDGs, and I would say, of course, it also affected Georgia in two directions. First is achieving especially social goals, because a lot of sectors, economic sectors, have been affected, like tourism and not just tourism but export as well. A challenge to keep it the same level as it was before, but something that maybe is not directly evident is when we analyze the budget cuts and relocations. We saw, because I represent an environmental organization, from our perspective, we saw how environmental goals were also affected a lot, because it's often not considered as such a priority as disaster risk management, of course. And we have now an initiative called Green Budget, which is a very unique approach in Georgia to have a holistic analysis of environmental, financial needs of the country, to reorganize the budget without necessarily increasing the budget, but to make sure that we also stick to environmental goals. So that's in terms of goals, and also in terms of process. COVID-19, of course, affected us. In case of engagement, we couldn't have such in-depth discussions as we wanted to, and hopefully next time we prepare for VNR, it will be a much more engaging process, hopefully also including the regions which were not so engaged in this year's report. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much to all of you. Thank you very much to all of the presenters, rapporteurs, which already had to leave the floor because we can only allow for a limited number of people here on the virtual platform. I'm absolutely not going to try to summarize anything that was said this afternoon, because we had a great breadth of countries with very different experiences. But I think if one thing was obvious from the various interventions and contributions today, clearly, and I don't need to repeat that, COVID-19 impacts all of us, and it impacts all of us in a devastating way. But there are many good examples out there on what is being done through countries, through different civil society organizations, which brings together, I think, the creativity of many different people in trying to improve something for the better. And if anything, I think this shows us that support for the 2030 agenda needs to be strengthened in light of the current challenges and the crisis. And we can really only turn the impacts of the COVID-19 crisis around if we all work together and stay true to the 2030 agenda. So with that, let me end. Organizers, we're only 5 minutes beyond the time you had given me, so I hope we're still okay. Ms. Kudo, thank you very much, everybody, again, also for the interesting questions that were provided through the YouTube chat. Goodbye, everybody, and thank you. And back to Natasha, please.
Indeed, thank you very much to the moderator, Katinka, and to all the panelists and presenters. This has been a very interesting discussion that touched upon many issues and indeed good examples. I just would like to make one final housekeeping announcement at the end of the session. In the YouTube chat, we are posting the link to the evaluation questionnaire for this session. Kindly complete it because it helps us to improve our meetings, to know what you thought about this. And then also, we very much look forward to see you tomorrow on the second day of the forum, where we will have a session on human health and well-being and leaving nobody behind at 10 a.m. Kazakhstan time, and also a fourth session on food systems and sustainable nutrition, which will be in the afternoon in Kazakhstan. Okay, thank you so much and see you again tomorrow. Well done.